Hello, and welcome back to Small Business Diaries. I'm your host, John Davis, and I'm back again with our co-host, Steve Ledgerwood. Now, today,
Yep.
I'm really excited, actually. More excited than I normally am. I mean, I'm quite an excitable person anyway. But today, we've got someone who I consider quite a good friend. A bit like me, Tom's a bit of a nerd. Unlike me, though, Tom's the founder of a very successful business and GTM consultancy called The Sales Architect, and I'm just toiling under Steve's iron fist. Um, but I'm not gonna try and butcher what Tom's business is all about. And I'd like to just hand the mic straight over to Tom. And why don't you tell me what the Sales Architect is all about?
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks for having me on, guys, as well. My name's Tom Parker. I'm the founder of the Sales Architect, which is my go-to-market and revenue operations consultancy business. I've been doing this for about 4 or 5 years now, and also worked with Capsule at one point in the past with these guys, which is how we got to know each other.
So Tom, tell us, why did you start this business and how did you go about it? Let's get the story right from the start.
Sure. So after university, I went to work for Intel for a few years, and I started off my career as a market analyst, very kind of operational focused. Did that for a few years and then moved to London and started working with a market research company in their kind of product team. So I was building out some of the statistical modeling and forecasting that we were using at Intel for them, so that they could then sell that to the broader market, including Intel, which was one of their customers at the time. Did that for a couple of years, and then at the end of that, moved into sales to sell the products that I'd just been working on building with the team. So that was my kind of first exposure to sales, really. And then, my career is kind of like a tale of two halves, really. It was very operational for the first half, and then since then it's been quite sales focused and marketing as well. So worked in sales with that company for about a year. Then I bounced around, kind of got a taste for sales and wanted to see what it was like in different places. So bounced around a couple of VC backed and private equity backed companies in London. And then I got bored of working for other people, so I started my own business. Roughly doing the same kind of stuff, mostly sales process or revenue process related, what is now called revenue operations. And I've done that now for maybe 30 or more startups or scale ups in the technology space, including you guys. Nowadays, it's less project work and a bit more kind of fractional focus. So I work with 2 or 3 clients maximum at the same time, to try and just deliver more value to them rather than a kind of project basis.
This is a trend that's coming on, right? So back in the day, you would do consulting work, but it's not like this, which is actually, you have the opportunity to create your own career through this fractional type profile piece. And actually, it's trending really well lately. And I'm assuming that the competition for fractional work is only becoming more.
Yes.
How do you navigate that?
It's to be honest, fractional. When I started my business, fractional was a word that I heard a couple of times, but didn't really know what it meant or know how to kind of position myself in that way. Over the last few years, it's kind of, like you say, exploded in popularity. I think basically, if you boil it down, it's being able to work a couple of part-time jobs in parallel to each other, which is effectively what it is. But it's kind of merging that kind of employment model with a consulting model. You can get a bit more deeper into a client's business and kind of act as one of the team more so than a consultant does. So it's a little bit more hands-on, I would argue. But I think it is becoming more competitive, but I think also the jobs market or the employer's view of it is changing as well. And so fractional vacancies are also increasing, potentially actually outpacing the number of fractional people. There's still a very high demand for that kind of model, especially in the startup space where maybe you can't afford to hire like a full-time C-level person for 6 figures, but you can afford to hire someone 2 or 3 days a week and you can still get a good chunk of their expertise and their support, but you can maybe backfill some of the tactical hands-on stuff with a more junior person, so that you can actually deliver on it and not just be bottlenecked by someone that's only with you for 2 days a week, for example.
2 questions for you, Tom, right? So what do you think is driving, fractional work, and then what's in it for you?
I think the drive from the employer side especially for smaller businesses, is if you can tap into 3 or 4 different people's expertise. And I've seen nowadays smaller startups that have a C-level that's exclusively made up of fractional. So you have a fractional head of marketing, fractional head of sales, fractional CFO. So I think that's kind of driving it, is that you can tap into that knowledge, but at a lesser cost than having to, and also the risk of obviously hiring someone, you have to pay their pension and national insurance contributions and all that kind of stuff. It's more flexible to be able to work on like a rolling 30-day basis with someone. And when you have outgrown them, you can move on and backfill them with a full-time role, for example. So it's kind of like a stepping stone from an employer's point of view. I think from our point of view, it takes a certain type of attitude to want to do, or to be able to do long-term fractional, because it's not too dissimilar to doing project or consultative work, where you have to be delivering something, but also in the back of your mind, you've got your own lead generation and pipeline generation. Obviously, being a sales or RevOps person, that doesn't worry me so much. But I know a lot of fractional, like CFOs, for example, that don't necessarily know how to position themselves, their brand, how to build their pipeline in the background. So it's difficult to get into from like a mental perspective, but once you're in there and you kind of figured out how it works and how to make it work with your personal life as well, because, for example, you might be working fractionally with an American company and a European-based company. So 2 days a week you're working on American time zone, and then 2 days a week you're working on European time zone. But once you get over all of that, I think it's really freeing, and it just gives you flexibility. I like to be doing multiple things at once. I get bored if I'm doing a full-time job for more than like a year or a year and a half. So
Yeah, I definitely know that about you, Tom. Steve, I want to ask you a question actually, to follow up. And you work with a lot of fractional people, Steve, like as a CEO of a small business. Do you agree with what Tom said?
I mean, I hated working with Tom, so I don't know why we're still having a call with him, really. Yeah, I was actually going to throw that question back to you, Tom, but I'll answer as well. I think it's important to note that not every fractional position that we've had has been successful. Yours was largely successful. There were a few hiccups along the way, just because I don't think our team was necessarily ready for a lot of the stuff that you were trying to implement. But ultimately, your thoughts and your structure and your process, we're still using all that stuff today. So that's very helpful. But there are a few times where fractional posts, they're so top level that they only remain top level. And then when they are out of the business, then no one knows what to do next, right? So, I feel like it's sometimes can be positive and negative. And maybe, back to you, Tom, just how do you feel about what I've just said there, and like how do you try and mitigate that?
Yeah, I think there's ways. So I've done over the last few years maybe 6 or 7 fractional roles, usually minimum of 2 in parallel to each other. My kind of observation there is it's good to de-risk that by attaching like a junior mid-level person to the fractional, especially if you're so I'm talking smaller startups here. So in a slightly larger, like you guys, obviously you've got like a multi-layered management structure because you're slightly larger. With some of the clients that I work with that are 15 people, 20 people across the organization, it's very horizontal. You just need to attach. So in my case, if it's doing a fractional head of RevOps, I'm doing one at the moment with a Dutch company. We hired in a kind of mid-level RevOps headcount, full-time headcount on staff there. And so he's kind of doing a lot of the tactical stuff and I do more of the strategic stuff, but we're kind of blending it together at the moment so that he can eventually backfill that role. And I think that's an important element, is when you start working fractionally with someone, to understand what your intentions and your time frame are, and whether you do intend to backfill them with a full-timer, or whether you're kind of testing a new function of a business or a new project. And therefore you don't necessarily need to worry so much about that. It's more of a kind of getting something off the ground, and then you can worry about that later. So there's some different ways of de-risking it. But I think the main thing that I observe is if people expect to have someone working 2 or 3 days a week, but delivering 40 hours a week's worth of work very tactically and also doing the strategy as well, that's where it falls apart. So you need to kind of attach someone to be able to do some of the ground level work underneath as well, usually.
So that's interesting for me. And that's, luckily we had that in our play, but having been I haven't been a fractional, but I've been advisors of other companies, and I will provide guidance. But definitely where it's fallen down is that there isn't anyone to tactically go and implement that, right? So, when you're going into a next fractional role, is it something that is that like a must-have for you, or is it like you're just giving a warning signal to try and make sure that there's no risk involved in like it falling down when you leave? How do you manage that?
Yeah, I think it depends on the size of company and the scope of the role. So I'm working with another client at the moment, and the scope of the role is I do 1 day a week, but it's very clearly boxed off. I'm doing expansion within their top 50 accounts. I'm kind of leading the sales cycle, but then also building out a kind of template or a structure for how to then hand that off to their sales team, which is only 2 people because it's a small business. But so when you kind of box it off quite clearly like that, I think that there's a kind of general time frame. It's maybe like a 6 to 9 months long project or fractional period, which is maybe slightly different. But I don't necessarily think you have to attach someone to it, but certainly with an organization that's 30 plus people and you've got more than 2 layers of management structure, if it's a role or a function that you intend to expand upon longer term, after 4 to 6 months of working with a fractional, you should really start to consider kind of bolstering up that department or that function, and then starting to think about handover plans. It's not usually cost effective for a fractional to stay in a business for more than 9 to 12 months anyway. So it's all about that kind of contingency planning for the long term. Yeah.
I think to box off this section, like one thing I've learned like in my career is you can only be as good as the plan if you execute it well. And I think I've been doing this podcast for a while now, and I've been speaking to a lot of small business owners, and one thing that like I found that some of them are very good at is they plan, but then they execute, and they execute quickly, and they've got this mindset that it doesn't matter, if you fail, because that's a learning, right? So definitely some sage advice, for sure, like execute quickly. Anyway, I want to move us back now to Tom's business, please, and want to talk more. Got to be quite bossy today, haven't I? This is not like me at all.
You are. This is the first time. I'm just surprised. Well, what can we do?
Yeah. Follow my orders. I want to know more about. So you talked about the getting your business and working a little bit, and then like wanting to become a consultant. Just talk to me about the early days. How did you go about getting things set up for the sales architect?
Yeah, so the business has gone through multiple iterations, partly because I started it, I think it was actually January 2020. So it's 5 years now. And then obviously COVID happened like 3 months later. So my initial intention, great timing. Yeah. I mean, fortunately, this type of work isn't too impacted, obviously, because it's all digital and fully remote potentially anyway. But it did certainly throw a spanner in the works, because my original intention was to do lots of kind of on-site workshops followed up with project delivery on like shorter time periods, which I did a few of after COVID kind of really passed in 2021, 22. Started out doing smaller projects like CRM implementations, kind of looking at like data flows in businesses, looking at sales processes, marketing processes, kind of like mapping that stuff out and helping the client understand their business process map effectively. And then it kind of merged into, actually ran like a small agency for a while. So it started to be quite successful. I hired a couple of guys into the team. One of them was a personal friend. It was really good fun. We got attached to another small business, and we actually built a product around a webinar demand generation agency, which is kind of the pretext to when I started working with you guys. So we spent like a year working on that. It was called Webinar as a Service. So it was kind of like a done for you. We build a webinar process, we deliver it, which generates leads or generates opportunities from existing customers. So that was relatively successful. And then for various reasons, we had to part ways with the other partner on that one. So then I kind of scaled it back down, couldn't afford to hire the other two guys under the individual consulting model. And then I kind of went into the fractional stuff. So it's kind of gone through like 3 phases. But I would say for anyone that's thinking about going down this road, I quit my previous job on like a Wednesday, ended up leaving on the Friday.
That's so specific.
Yeah, I remember it because it was so specific. So like left on the Wednesday, they decided to basically put me on gardening leave on the Friday, started the business on the Monday. I had 0 clients, 0 expertise or experience of like running my own business at that point, other than selling stuff on eBay when I was like a teenager. And yeah, that was a steep learning curve. I didn't make any money for 4 or 5 months, I think. And I was doing kind of like work for free and, trying to like build case studies and testimonials and things like that in the early days, and just try to figure out exactly what it was that I wanted to do. The concept of RevOps was still, it wasn't really a term at that point, but I kind of knew roughly what I wanted to do in that space. More like sales ops back then, and now it's kind of merged into RevOps. But yeah, it's difficult. And the road to like becoming a fractional, I think you have to go through the phase of doing some project. You can't just leave full-time employment and announce that you're a fractional, which I see often in the Slack groups with like 20,000 fractional people. I look at it and I'm like, I don't know if there's really 20,000 of us in this group. Because I think you have to kind of go through the life cycle of doing consulting or doing project-based work to land on the fractional model, which is somewhere in between the two, to make it really effective. But it's gone through phases. I'm happy with where it's at, or I've been happy in all 3 phases, but I think it evolves over time, and you kind of have to follow the market to some extent. RevOps grew, fractional grew. So being a fractional head of RevOps is just like a good golden space to be in at the moment. But that'll change in a couple of years' time. So it will probably change again.
I wanted to come in actually. I was listening to your story then, and a few things stuck out to me straight away, right? So Steve and I've been doing this for a while. I've mentioned that twice already, sorry. Let's not flex, it's a fact. But everyone we've been speaking to, like the golden rule about going and doing your own thing is having a network in place, right? And having like some contacts that you can kind of lean back on, knowing that okay, well, I've got a steady stream of work here with people that, I've worked with in the past. I can like bring that pipeline in. You didn't do that. So like,
Right.
that's and to get where you are now, that's commendable. How did you do that?
Oh God, and lots of 70+ hour weeks to start with. On the partnership development or the kind of network building, that's how I really broke into it eventually after about a year. So it's like 6 months of making no money, 6 months of making hardly any money. But over that period of time, I was starting to develop a network with other consultants, other agency owners, other freelancers. And a lot of those connections I still have today. I still do work with other, and a lot of them have now also become fractionals over time as well. So I do like co-pitch or co-market for work with some of that network that I've now had for like 4 or 5 years. I would definitely say if you can de-risk it by building something on the side, whether it's just delivering 1 or 2 projects to get a feel for how that works. Obviously, it depends on if your employer allows it technically or not. But in the economy nowadays, generally speaking, the gig economy, people are doing things on the side anyway. Like test the water. Don't do what I did. Jump when you're kind of ready or feel that you have enough work to cover maybe like half of the salary that you were used to having before. I think a lot of people get stuck in the analysis paralysis stage of like, well, I want to make sure I'm covering my full-time salary from the project work. You're never going to get there unless you're working like 80-hour weeks in the interim period, because unless you strike on like a product or a service that's particularly profitable, it's unlikely. So de-risk it a bit and then kind of take slower steps. Build the network is like 100% one of the most important things that I did. And I still lean on it today. If I lose a project or I lose a fractional client, I go to my Slack groups or I go to my like HubSpot mailing list, for example, where I keep all of my partner contacts, shoot an email out, and more often than not over the years, someone will come back with, oh yeah, I spoke to a founder last week and they're looking for someone, blah, blah, blah. And then you go into like lead gen mode. But you can't do everything at the same time in parallel. So you just need to have these like fallback systems for how you regenerate pipeline when you need to, so you can focus on delivery when you've got active projects in place. Yeah.
So Tom, just on that, you've told us that basically you've got to have something first to just make sure that you have a use case or a case study that you can obviously have while you're full time. What else can you tell people who are thinking about fractional roles that may be a little bit scary or maybe opportunistic or maybe great? That just gives them a little bit more of a rounded picture.
Yeah, I think join some of the communities and the kind of forums and discussion groups. So there's in all sorts of places, like Slack is probably the best one. There's 3 or 4 that I'm part of on Slack, which I'll share with you guys, and maybe you can post it alongside this, which are really good places to kind of learn about and understand how it works and get advice from people as well. There's LinkedIn groups, there's even like subreddits that discuss this stuff as well. So I think kind of getting into that before you make that decision is useful. Figuring out that I've seen the most successful fractionals focus on a niche. Say like being a fractional CMO comes with lots of competition. Being a fractional head of RevOps doesn't, and there's not actually that many of us doing that specifically. And RevOps is pretty broad nowadays as well. So like within that, you've got marketing ops and CS ops and sales ops, right? So the further you can go on a niche, the better. The more you niche, the more likely it is that you're going to have to work with medium-sized companies because they're looking for that specific functional support. Whereas the more broad base you are, the more likely it is that you could work with like a startup and do all of their marketing or all of their sales related stuff, for example. So I think, yeah, just understanding what you want your niche to be. Obviously, if that niche is coming off the back of your own industry experience, that's great. But I think there's also good opportunity in the space right now for identifying gaps and specifically working your way into that. I've seen some fractionals. When I look at it, I think, yeah, okay, you're going for a fractional thing, but they package it up in a way that makes it look more like project focused or more short term. But you can see that that's actually just a funnel into a longer term piece of work that they intend to go into once they've completed that project. So thinking about how you want to like package it all up, and then just speak to people. Like, I'm always available if anyone wants to have a conversation about it. Feel free to reach out. And I've always found that fractionals and consultants and agency owners are very generous with their time and like willing to talk you through what they did and how they achieved it like this. But also give like some really direct advice as well on how to actually achieve it based on your own experience, your own expertise, your own proposal that you have for going into the market. And they can validate that quite quickly because most fractionals have worked with multiple other fractionals as well. So they know what the market needs and what people are looking for right now as well.
What do you think that like you've done really well, I guess, in the last 5 years of running your business?
Oh, I'm not very good at the humble brags. I know John is, as we've seen already, but I'm kidding. I think it's actually a lot of what I do is just it follows on from my passion. Like I don't see the point in starting an agency or being a freelancer or becoming a consultant if the subject matter that you want to consult on is not of personal interest to you. If you're doing it just to make money, I don't think it's destined to fail to some extent, right? unless you're like super money motivated and that keeps you going. But I've always found the passion for the work keeps me going much more than the money does. And so I think, I guess what I've done quite well is figured out that RevOps is what I wanted to do, and then stayed within that niche and kind of really like explored it. Like the Dutch company that I'm working with at the moment, they turn over 30 million. They've got 300 headcount, and I'm the head of RevOps there. And I'm learning so much from that, because it's completely different to like even working with you guys, right? It's like a slightly different scale. It's like the next step in the revenue and headcount kind of growth chart. But then also, I think the most important thing is to kind of be humble and understand when the market isn't looking for what you have to offer, or at least your network or your immediately serviceable market doesn't need what you want right now, or what you have right now. Because it's easy to like go down a rabbit hole of starting to do loads of outbound and brand building, and you start spending a lot of money on marketing. So what I've done from time to time is switch from being like a head of RevOps to just doing like a CRO, just doing a CRO or a head of sales role instead, because it's more broad based.
Quaking in his boots there, like getting pretty.
I mean,
not to minimalize.
CRO is just the more senior of the two options, but
not to minimalize that kind of role, but it's like from time to time it's good to do something a bit more broad based that can apply to a different sector or a different market. And I've done that a couple of times. I've been like a CGO, CRO, CSO a couple of times. Doesn't really matter what the job title is. RevOps is very different to that functionally. So it's just about, if you're spending a month, after your fractional gig finishes, if you're spending a month or more looking for something in your niche, just go up one level in the kind of hierarchy and look at something a bit more broad based, and you're more likely to find available roles in that, basically. Just following your nose, really. I think that's the best way. That's the best way to do it, because if you stay too idealistic, like you want to go with your passion, but if you're too idealistic about what you want to deliver, it comes at the expense of revenue. And when you're living gig to gig, you don't always have enough money in the bank to go 6 months without a gig, right? So you've got to kind of be flexible in that way.
Well, that's great insight. I'm going to be bossy again. I'm going to move us on, actually. And
do it.
What
I like this new John. It's great.
Can you tell us about your hair, though, John? Just.
So for our listeners, you won't be able to see my hair. For our viewers, you can see that, I have not had a haircut in nearly 2 months. And I did go to the gym just before this podcast, and I got back late, very much just assembled this bird's nest. That's been the subject.
I was gonna tell you afterwards that I saw that you probably haven't showered today, but this is sort of something I'm saying out.
No, I actually did shower. That's the thing before the podcast.
Oh dear, that's even worse.
No, these aren't pajamas. These are my legitimate clothes. I'm a dad to a 7-month-old child. Like, personal grooming, personal hygiene, all out the window. I've told the internet that. Now everyone knows. Anyway, I want to move on to asking you some specific questions about your role and the industry that you work in. So the thing about Capsule is we've got lots of different customers at lots of different stages, of their business life cycle. We have some people in your position, who are very much like sole traders, limited companies with 1 employees. And then we've got like much bigger customers that have somewhere up to 200 employees. Now, some people may need help, with their day-to-day with fractional consultants. So as a fractional consultant yourself, what would you say you would advise people to look for when considering getting a fractional consultant in?
I think the key to fractional really is trying to understand, have I found a good fit for this department or function or role within my business already? If yes, and if you have like an operational blueprint for how that function should work, you're probably more likely looking for a full-time employee to come in and run that function and build it out. If you're experimenting with a function, or you need a specific high level of expertise, but you can't necessarily afford someone full time. Those are the two cases where fractional is better. In terms of what to look for, I think there are now, it wasn't the case a few years ago, but there are now enough fractionals out there that you would probably want to be looking for someone that has industry specific or function specific expertise. Someone that's kind of been there and done that, helped another business or multiple other businesses do what you're trying to achieve over the coming 6 to 12 months, so that they have direct experience that they can bring with them. The good thing about consultants or fractionals in general is they tend to have a blueprint that they bring with them that applies 80% of the time, and is something that they've developed over time working with their other customers. And then it's the kind of variable 20% is the personalized bit as to how that works in your business. So it's a really good way of just like testing and iterating, like, do we need a RevOps function in my case, for example? In slightly larger businesses, like 200 headcount, we've got a sales team of 10 people, we've got a marketing team of 10 people, we've got a CS team of 10 people. Do we need someone that can glue those three functions together and provide a thread through them with processes and data analytics and strategic insight? And that's what a RevOps kind of role is. If it's a smaller business, you probably don't need a RevOps person. But if you want to do sales or marketing in a very data and process oriented way, then find a fractional who has worked in your industry or has worked with that type of approach. And yeah, just make sure that you're referencing that and making sure that that's actually legitimate. Because like I said, there's quite a lot of people that have come from the employment, like full-time employment background, and they just position themselves as a fractional because they can see it's a hot topic, but they're not really used to working in that way. I kind of see fractional as kind of like a SWAT team that you like parachute in and they get something built up or delivered over a period of like 3, 6, 12 months, and then they backfill themselves and exfiltrate from the situation, right? And so if you're looking for something other than that, then maybe consider alternative options. There's also the agency model as well. So like, for example, building out like a demand gen function, you can either do it internally and build systems and processes, which you then hire for to like man the machine, or you go to a demand gen agency or a lead generation agency and they just deliver leads to you. If you're not sure what kind of lead you're looking for, it's better to build it internally. If you're very sure about what kind of lead you're looking for and you're willing to commit an agency to like specific KPIs and SLAs for that, then an agency model is probably better for you. So it's all about experimentation, basically, I think. And then finding someone that's kind of gone through that cycle and understands how experimentation and iteration should work to success, to like a successful end result. Yeah.
I feel like everything you're saying is just resonating, right? I like your helicopter analogy, and I like your experimentation analogy, right? I think in those situations, particularly, sometimes you're not really sure what you want or what's going to work. So in our case, we'd never done demand gen in this company before. All of it was inbound. So, we wanted someone who had the know-how to be able to just explore it with us. And so, yeah, that's a very good conversation. We know it's going to be 3, maybe 6 months. Will we use all the information that we worked with you together? Maybe, maybe not. But at least we've experimented around the option. And then for the helicopter thing, I agree. Sometimes you don't have a CMO, so you bring in people who can create frameworks to essentially manage the gap until you get enough revenue to hire the right person, right? So yeah, I like both of those analogies. They've really fit for my understanding of what a fractional role would look like.
I think it's, just to add to that very quickly, I think it's important to identify the difference between like a temporary contract maternity cover, for example, which might be 6 or 12 months, where it's a role that is already well predefined and there's roles and responsibilities associated to it, versus this kind of like experimenting, setting up a new function or setting up a new project is a different type of skill set, and there's a different type of contractual arrangement that you should want to have in both of those cases.
One thing I've observed from doing these sessions is some of the more effective like business leaders that I have interviewed is their lack of like fear about experimentation, and treating that as like an opportunity to learn, right? And eliminating that failure, mentality and mindset. And treating any experiment as an investment, right, to better understand how, I don't know, their business might run, how their market might play, or like what levers they can pull to drive initiatives that are kind of key to their business operations.
Just like very quickly on that, I think to that point, there's a difference in experimenting when your back's against the wall and you're, say, like in my case, you're starting to see the sales team fall apart or you're starting to see processes that are out of date. And then there's forward investment when times are better, where you're starting to say, how do we build a better platform for future success? So there's proactive and reactive experimentation. It's a lot easier to do it from a place of positivity, where if it doesn't work out, it's like, okay, it's not going to impact us too much. Versus the opposite is where it's like, if this doesn't work out, we're screwed. And this really, really has to work. That level of pressure, I've done one or two of those roles, that level of pressure isn't good for either party. So it's better to like experiment ahead if you can, and always, like you say, invest rather than react, because seeing it as cost.
I have a question on that there. And sorry, John, I'm taking over now. There is a number of businesses who are in the camp of reactive, and they are struggling to get themselves ahead. They probably got a cash burn rate of 6 months or so. They're trying to figure stuff out. They know that their product or their solution or their whatever is viable. They've tested it in the market. They've got a number of customers, but for some reason it's just tanking. What advice do you give to those people rather than having a fractional? What do they do instead?
Yeah, it's difficult. I think because I've actually been in a business where not too long after I left, it went into liquidation. Not because of me on the pro or con side of that, but because they didn't invest enough ahead of time, unfortunately, and it was starting to become more and more reactive. But they didn't. The thing that I would advise is they didn't make some of the critical cost cutting and hard decisions early enough. So if you are getting down to like a 6-month burn rate and cutting some staff or like cutting some paid ads, like paid marketing spend or whatever, can get you from like a 6-month runway to an 8-month runway, it's almost too late. It's like, never say never, but it's almost too late at that point. You need to be kind of looking further ahead than that and try to avoid that situation as much as you can. If you are in that situation, like the best time to make those hard decisions was yesterday. The second best time is right now, and the worst time is tomorrow or further into the future. You just have to make hard decisions sometimes. And I've always advised, because I do a bit of like coaching and advisory stuff as well on the side. I always advise founders to slim it back down to where the business was maybe like a couple of years ago, where it was mostly just you and a few other people, and get back to like the core essence of what made you successful before you grew to 10 or 15 or 20 people, and kind of like get right back to basics and re-deliver on that. So like the channels that you went to market with back then are probably still just as valid now. So go back to basics and redo fewer things better, rather than trying to cover broad base and spending in lots of different areas. Because when you spread your spend thin, especially in marketing, you don't get enough kind of like sample data to really understand whether it's working or not. And you don't get enough, you're probably not investing enough in the bids that you're making to actually make a difference with the audiences from like a PPC perspective. So yeah, that would be my advice. Yeah.
I was talking earlier on about like the breadth of customers that Capsule have. Many different small business owners I speak with are looking to do more sales and marketing. So it's very much on the theme of the last question. Given your experience in both, what advice would you give to very small business owners that are looking to do more of that and perhaps hire?
So if you're relatively early stage and you're trying to figure out whether your go-to-market model basically sales and marketing is like a seesaw, right? You can raise the overall position of the seesaw by increasing the length of the bit in the middle, right? And then you grow both teams at the same time. But most businesses are actually at a position where they need to decide on, are we a marketing driven business or are we a sales driven business? Generally speaking, if you're in B2B, if you're in high ticket, if you're in complex cycles, like complex decision making or like a large buyer committee, like you need to engage with lots of people to make the sale, you're going to be a sales driven organization. If you're B2C, lower ticket, higher volume, like a 2-touch purchase, you don't need to convince them too much. It's maybe like a set of headphones or whatever like that. Then it's going to be more of a marketing driven business, right? But it's what most of the business that I've worked with, that's not like a hard and fast rule. And actually finding the blend is the most difficult piece. Because if you're going to choose to spend 5K a month on ads or 5K a month on another BDM salary, salesperson salary, it's like what's going to move the needle the most. And with all of these investments, half of marketing is successful, but we don't know which half is the same, right? So you can spend 5K a month over 6 months and get nothing, or you can spend 5K a month over 6 months and get great results. Even when you get great results, you don't know why sometimes necessarily, right?
It's frustrating as hell.
Yeah, so it's just trying to figure out like what type of business model do you think could work for your product and the go-to-market approach that you need to take. Get advice. Like again, for me, it's always engage with a consultant or engage with a coach. Even have a few I think coaching, like the coaching industry, has exploded recently as well, for a really good reason, because engaging with a functional coach who you can have a session once a fortnight over the course of the next 3 months, just to like touch base and get advice on, we're thinking about adding another guy to the sales team, XYZ situation. What do you think? If you engage with 2 or 3 advisors or coaches or consultants, you're going to get a pretty well-rounded picture of different points of view and different approaches that you could take. And I think a lot of people see that potentially as like wasted money. But then anyone that's done therapy, for example, would say, well, before I did therapy, I thought it was a waste of money. And then after I've done therapy, I completely agree that it's an investment in my mental health, right? It's the same with coaching and consulting or advisory. So yeah, I would get as much advice as you can from people that have, again, scaled a business from where you are today in your industry to the next step along in your industry. Those are the best types of advice that you can get. But then there's also podcasts and YouTube and etc. as well, right? Blog posts and all that. So
before I bring in Steve, and I really want to bring in Steve on this because he's got a great expertise on this subject. Just your last point there about coaching and therapy. I've done both, and I was very lucky with therapy. I had a great therapist that understood me really well. But on the coaching side, it's been a bit hit and miss. And I think when you go and, open yourself up and be vulnerable, on the coaching side of things, it's about finding the person that's the right fit for you. Right. And that takes time, to go ahead and do that. So that would be my big takeaway, from that.
There's a few like really good models for that. So I do some coaching through a company called My Sales Coach. I'm not promoting them right now, but I'm just saying that there are models like that where you pay a subscription to access a pool of coaches, and then you can speak to different people each week. And if you like one of them, you can stick with them. And if you didn't quite gel with them or you don't need their expertise right now, you can circle back round to them later. In the same way that like BetterHelp has a similar model for therapy, right? Where if you don't get along with your therapist, you can change to someone else. So if you're looking for multiple points of view, then engaging with one of those coaching platforms is better than engaging with specific coaches until you find someone or the type of expertise, and then you know what you're looking for. You can go and find a specific person outside of those platforms.
Yeah, that's so great. So Steve, let's bring you in here now. So thinking about Tom's the question I just asked Tom there, small business owners looking to do more with sales and marketing, just react to what Tom said there and any insight that you have from being an expert in the field in sales and marketing yourself.
The question whether you're a marketing driven organization or a sales one is the right one. are you willing to bet your success on marketing or sales? And then you have to then think about a runway. So once you've made that decision, and that's based on your market, your product, if you're going to go high volume, as in, you're going to be going after small businesses or enterprise, so once you've understood your ICP, I suppose, from that point, you then know what you need to hire for. Well, then you suspect what you need to hire for. You then need to look at a run rate. And I always just say to anyone who's running a small business, before you hire anyone, you need to have a run rate of 12 months with that person in there, in that team, as a minimum. And the reason for why I say that is because you need that person to feel secure enough to know that they can at least be in the business for 12 months. Otherwise, they're going to be stressing the whole time. And for you as a business owner, you're not going to be putting pressure on them to drive unnecessary results as soon as they start, because they need time to actually get on board and figure things out. So I would just say, if you're wanting to hire someone, you're going to have money in the bag for that. And I know that's hard because many small businesses don't, but just push through until you find that money to be able to secure it. In the meantime, though, you have people like Tom. Well, not Tom, or people are there to be able to consult and help and try and guide through those difficult times. And so yeah, I was trying to.
It's a double-edged sword for us as fractional. It's like we know that we don't have the level of job security, let's call it, but then we also, the model that we adopt is specifically targeted at an audience who have the same problem, right? So it's two sides of the same coin. And yeah, as much as I say invest ahead of time as much as you can, there is also the reactive element to how we can help as fractionals as well, because yeah, you don't always know that you are going to have 12 months of runway when you incorporate heavy headcount costs. Yeah, I completely agree with Steve. Yeah.
All right, listen, I'm going to stop being bossy, and Steve's got a question actually that he's been dying to ask you this entire time. So Steve, it's over to you, mate.
I mean, this is just a follow-on from my relationship with you, Tom.
I think I know what's coming.
I feel like we were really close at one stage. We were speaking daily. Felt like I got really I got to know you a lot, and then you asked me a strange question once, and I don't know, it's I just feel like we should tell our listeners about that question.
Get out, Steve, it's fine. I know this is trauma.
I'm just wondering where you think Australia is.
Yeah, I thought this might be it. Look, I'll put it in simple terms. We were running a campaign targeted at a specific region.
Oh my word!
I misheard the accent, and I thought, you know what, Steve's golden for this. So we can use the Aussie angle here. But obviously, that was a great mistake. It's not the kind of mistake that you typically want to make 1 month into an engagement, because the harassment for the following months was quite. Yeah, but yeah, I think it was character building for both of us, Steve.
If I'm honest, I've tried to get a stronger South African accent just so that no one else makes that mistake ever again.
He's turned up to call speaking Afrikaans.
We still talk about it to that day. So yeah.
Good stuff.
Did you ever crack into the market though? That's the question. Did you ever lead into it? I think you should have gone fully into it, Steve, to be honest.
If I'm honest, as soon as you told me that I was Australian, I was like, I'm not going there at all. You're just going to go target a new region. It's just too, I have deep emotion around that.
Moving swiftly on now for the final few questions, Tom. Tell us what the long-term plan for the sales architect is.
Oh, blimey. I don't think I have one, mate, to be honest with you. Probably just get through the next week and then see what happens. No, I'm kidding. I think, so for me, maybe another bit of advice, like one of the main things I've seen over the last 5 years or so is a real move towards personal brand building and content. I had my own podcast in, I don't know, 2021, 22, when podcasts and webinars were the only way to engage with people. And yeah, I kind of like dropped it by the wayside, but I've seen and I've worked with, there's a young guy called Ollie that I work with. I've been working with him for a few years. And I actually invested in his startup, and he's now gone down like a full B2C route, and he's doing TikTok and Instagram and LinkedIn content. And we're like really cracking it now. And it is only since we decided to go down a content driven approach to building his brand for him as himself, rather than the Our Gem brand, which is the business, that we've started to see real success. So I think I'm going to do and need to do the same thing. Obviously, the name of the business was chosen specifically because it's like an alter ego, I suppose. Like I sometimes, rightly or wrongly, refer to myself as the sales architect, in the same way like a superhero might do. But
that
yeah,
explains a lot.
Yeah, exactly. I talk about myself often in the third person. So yeah, I think that's something that I really want to focus on.
Is that person from Scotland? I'm just checking.
Yeah, I just tap into my Scottish roots, So yeah, I think that's for me like going to be the big thing. Whether I'm going to do it for myself or kind of like do it through other mediums, which again, another thing that I've learned. Why invest all the effort and studio and producers and all that in doing your own podcast when you can just jump on John's podcast and do it there instead?
Boom.
I can still post it to my audience. So I think that's another way that consultants are really like building their brand at the moment. There's the concept of 7-11-4, which again, maybe we can post in the chat underneath the podcast or whatever, that you need to engage with. I'm going to butcher this completely now, but you need to engage with people for 7 hours over 11 separate touch points on 4 different channels. So it's a piece of research that's holds true, I think. So yeah, I mean, you need to find 4 different mediums in which to communicate yourself, like written on your website, podcasts, audio book, or writing a book, whatever it is. And the more places that you can be seen, and the better you build your own personal brand, the more people associate you with the problem and the solution that they're looking to solve for. So yeah, that's kind of my plan for later on this year, although work's been pretty busy recently, but I'm using ChatGPT to help me structure a plan at the moment for how I'm going to build out a content series. So yeah, keep an eye out for that when it eventually comes in 3 years' time.
Looking forward to see it. I mean, personal branding, big thing. Seeing a lot of that. We're experimenting with Steve's personal brand at the moment. One of our employees, Rose, meets with Steve every Monday, gets an uninterrupted stream of consciousness from Steve for half an hour.
I'm not sure it's a good thing.
Yeah, poor Rose.
Yeah,
I was going to say, I say that as well.
We all feel bad for her, but she's absolutely crushing it at the moment with the numbers and the engagement. Steve's unfortunately doing rather well on that front.
If only you'd chosen yourself instead, John.
I know.
As an Australian, I'm doing very well.
Listen, let's wrap this up. So, final 2 questions. What's the one piece of advice you could give to your younger self?
Network earlier. I think when I went through or was preparing to go through university, and this is increasingly so more the case going into the future, you assume that getting a degree is going to put you on a career path, like as a guarantee, basically. Obviously, the competition for that is increasing. It's global competition. There's more people going to university in the UK or in the Western world. So I didn't really take advantage of networking until I was sort of coming to the end of university and then got into work. And then I was fortunate. Intel is like 100,000 person organization, and they encourage you to network internally. But yeah, since starting my own business, I've realized that it's really interesting to just have chats with other business owners or other agency owners or, people that do the same role as you in a different type of business. You can learn from each other. And nowadays there's great platforms to connect you with those people over shared themes or, common common interests and things like that. So yeah, network as much as you can, and be shameless in asking questions as well. I mean, that's the core to being a consultant. But I've only really learned that in the last couple of years. Is like asking why, and then asking why again, and then asking why again is not a bad thing. And a lot of what you're doing is helping the recipient of that to come to their own conclusion, which is a lot of what consulting really is, beyond like the frameworks and stuff.
Yeah, it's the 5 whys, isn't it? It's a framework I use in messaging to kind of get to the bottom of the point of the message. What is it that we're trying to, and you can use it in problem solving and all sorts. So
for sure, and
great,
for learning
great.
when you're starting out. Yeah.
Great insight. Last question: where can we learn more about you and your business?
Well, you can go to my website, which I haven't put enough care and attention into because it was redone about 2 years ago and I've changed my services and things since. But if you would like to go to my website, it's thesalesarchitect.co.uk. LinkedIn, also the Sales Architect, again, talking about myself in the third person. Yeah, I mean, reach out. I'm happy to share my email address with the guys. They can post it alongside this content. If you've got any questions, drop me an email anytime. More than happy to, and I always provide, if it's coaching or mentoring or whatever it is that you're looking for, the first session is always free. So yeah, please reach out, and I'm happy to help and support via email, and then we can set up a call and go from there.
Amazing. John is very grateful, Tom, for joining us today on Small Business Diaries. Thought I'd give it a go. It didn't really fit, did it?
No, it doesn't work, does it? Yeah.
No,
I haven't made it work for 5 years, so good effort there.
But seriously, no, thank you to everybody that's listening. Thank you for joining us for this episode. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe so you never miss an episode. That's on the YouTube, that's on our Spotify, that's on all the wonderful places that we have the podcast. And let us know what you think about this episode in the comment section below on YouTube, or even reach out to us directly on our website. I've been John Davis, or rather, I am John Davis, because I'm still continuing to be me. I'm the content lead at Capsule. That's Steve. That's Tom. See you all later.